Hello, everyone. Today we're embarking on an intriguing project, developing a 2024 election map that utilizes party registration data from nearly 14 million ballots already cast across the nation. To assist us in this task, NBC News provides an exceptional tool that monitors mail-in plus early in-person voting across almost every state. At the moment of this recording, we see that 47% of these ballots have been submitted by registered Democrats, 36% by registered Republicans, plus 17% by independents or voters affiliated with third parties. It's clear that Democrats have an early edge. Traditionally, they are more likely to vote by mail plus engage in early in-person voting, while Republicans tend to turn out more on Election Day itself. However, instead of merely accepting these figures at face value, we're going to dig deeper. We'll consider additional factors like polling data, demographic trends, plus prediction markets to create a more precise projection of how this election might unfold. So let's get started. On our electoral map, the states that are already colored in are those for which NBC News has yet to release early voting data. These states include the reliably Democratic Pacific states of Washington plus Hawaii, which together account for 16 electoral votes for Kamala Harris. On the Republican side, we see the solid southern states of Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, plus Kentucky, contributing a total of 56 electoral votes. We can confidently assert that early vote data from these states is unnecessary, as they are almost guaranteed to vote strongly Republican. To save time, I won't delve deeply into the other solid states for either candidate. Instead, I'll provide a concise overview, beginning with former President Trump. The early voting data suggests that Republicans are set to excel in several states. As anticipated, Idaho showcases a commanding R plus 31 margin, while Utah is at R plus 27, Montana at R plus 21, plus Wyoming stands out with a remarkable R plus 61. North Dakota registers an R plus 30, South Dakota an R plus 36, plus Kansas shows R plus 16, Oklahoma R plus 13, Indiana R plus 16, plus Tennessee R plus 33. Each of these states voted for Trump by substantial margins in 2020, plus haven't leaned blue since at least 2008. With these states included, Trump's total electoral votes rose to 114. It's important to remember that 270 is the magic number to clinch the presidency. For those of you who are acquainted with this election cycle's map, you may have noticed that Nebraska plus West Virginia have been left blank for now. Both states generally lean solidly Republican in favor of Trump, yet current data indicates Nebraska is only at R plus 1, with 42% of Republican ballots cast versus 41% from Democrats. However, a closer examination of the remaining requested ballots in Nebraska reveals a significantly stronger Republican inclination at 47% to 35%. As is often the case, Democrats appear to be overrepresented in early voting, with an expected shift as we approach Election Day. The early Democratic strength in Nebraska likely correlates with its 2nd district, which trends blue plus is moving leftward. This district, which Biden won by 6.5 points in 2020, is urban plus contains a considerable share of college graduates, demographics that typically engage in early voting. For our map, I'll categorize Nebraska's statewide race as likely Republican, while the strongly Republican 1st plus 3rd districts remain solidly in that camp. The 2nd district, however, will lean blue. Now, let's shift our focus to West Virginia. This state was Trump's 2nd strongest in the nation during the 2020 election. Nonetheless, 45% of the early votes have been cast by Democrats, compared to 37% for Republicans. It's noteworthy that the total number of early votes, 9,475, is relatively small, plus even the outstanding requested ballots, which lean Democratic, amount to only around 177,000 votes out of a registered voter population of about 1.25 million in West Virginia. These early votes represent merely about 2% of the electorate. The fact that Trump secured West Virginia by an impressive 39 percentage points back in 2020 serves as a more significant data point, meaning this small early voting sample does not change the overall outlook. West Virginia will remain solidly Republican on our map. Next, let's pivot to Kamala Harris. Democrats are maintaining strong early leads in several deep blue states. In Oregon, Democrats boast an astonishing D plus 47 advantage, while in Harris's home state of California the margin is D plus 18. Every registered voter in California has mailed a ballot, plus over 1 million have already been returned, showing 49% for Democrats, plus 31% for Republicans. Looking at the broader picture, we cannot overlook Illinois, the only deep blue state not situated on the coast, which currently stands at D+15. In the Democrat-dominant Northeast, the numbers are equally impressive. New York shows D+30, New Jersey D+42, Maryland D+49, Delaware D+38, Connecticut D+26, Massachusetts D+28, Vermont D+46, plus Rhode Island D+27. Joe Biden won all of these states by at least 15 points in 2020, plus none have voted Republican since 1988, solidifying their status as secure Democratic strongholds. Together, these states position Kamala Harris ahead of Trump with a total of 181 electoral votes. Now we turn our attention to the remaining 18 competitive states, which we will analyze in more detail. Let's start with Alaska, where around 6,000 ballots have been returned so far. Presently, Republicans lead by 4 points, with 29% of ballots cast by Republicans compared to 25% by Democrats, plus an impressive 46% from independent or non-affiliated voters. Alaska has the highest proportion of independent voters in the nation, plus while it's uncertain how these ballots will ultimately break, historical trends suggest Trump holds an advantage. No Democrat has won Alaska since 1964. However, Trump's 10-point margin in 2020 was the narrowest for Republicans since 1968. With this context, we'll classify Alaska in the likely Republican category. Next, we examine Nevada, where over 100,000 ballots have already been cast. Currently, Democrats have a 5-point lead over Republicans, with 40% to 35%. In the 2020 election, Biden won Nevada by 2.4%. The early voting was similarly split, with Democrats leading 39% to 35%. Notably, Democrats are outperforming their 2020 margin by 1 point, suggesting a potential increase in their lead. However, current polling indicates Trump is ahead of Harris by 0.8% based on an average of the last 7 polls. Given these mixed signals, we'll classify Nevada in the tilt blue category for Harris, indicating she is likely to win by less than 2 points. For reference, margins of 2 to 6 points are considered lean, 6 to 10 likely, plus more than 10 safe. Now let's move to Arizona, another competitive race in the Southwest. Arizona was the second closest state in 2020, with Biden winning by only 0.3%. The early vote figures here show Republicans poised for a strong performance, currently leading Democrats by 7 points among the 360,000 mail-in plus early in-person votes cast, 43% to 36%. Compared to the 2020 election in Arizona, Republicans only outnumbered Democrats by 3 points at 38% to 35%. Currently, Republicans are outperforming their 2020 numbers by 4 points, which could be significant, as any decline for Democrats may be consequential, given their narrow victory margin. Polling also suggests Trump is on track to win Nevada with a lead of 1.6% based on the last 7 surveys. Therefore, we'll categorize Arizona in the tilt Republican section of our map. Next, we turn our attention to Colorado plus New Mexico. Notably, the 2020 election marked the first time in over 50 years that Colorado voted to the left of New Mexico, trending significantly leftward to favor Joe Biden by nearly 14 points, while he only carried New Mexico by 11%. In terms of early voting, Democrats outnumber Republicans by 15 points in New Mexico, plus by a narrower 5 points in Colorado. Historically, independent voters in Colorado lean strongly left. In 2020, early voting revealed Democrats had only a 2-point advantage over Republicans, with 40% of those ballots cast by independents. Nevertheless, Biden won by 13.5%. Returning to our electoral map, I'll classify both states as safe blue since Democrats are poised to match their 2020 margins. Now let's conclude our exploration of the Southwest with Texas, the second largest prize on the electoral map, worth 40 electoral votes. Thus far, 133,000 ballots have been returned, plus Democrats currently lead Republicans by 7 points, with 50% to 43%. It's crucial to mention that early voting hasn't officially started until today, so these numbers reflect only a small sample, primarily from mail-in ballots. We'll have a clearer picture as early voting progresses in the coming days. In the 2020 election, Trump won Texas by 5.6%, the narrowest Republican margin in the state this century. while early plus absentee voting favored Republicans by 17 points, at 53% to 36%, with over 9.5 million ballots cast. At present, the early returns represent less than 1% of the expected total, plus the data is heavily skewed toward mail-in voters, who typically lean more Democratic. Given the current polling, which shows Trump leading Harris by approximately 2.5%, I'll categorize Texas in the likely Republican column. Next, let's move north to the Midwest, where the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are pivotal battlegrounds. These three states, often referred to as the Blue Wall, flipped to Trump in 2016, helping him win the presidency, only to flip back to Biden in 2020. Each of these states is crucial in 2024, and early voting patterns are offering some hints. Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, early vote returns show that Democrats currently hold a significant edge, with 46% of ballots cast by registered Democrats compared to 34% by Republicans. This 12-point lead is notable, as Democrats only had a 4-point lead in early votes at this point in 2020. Biden narrowly won Wisconsin by just 0.6% in 2020, and the fact that Democrats are outperforming their early voting numbers from that year is a positive sign for Harris. However, polling has been quite close, with Trump and Harris nearly tied in recent surveys. Given the current data, I'll categorize Wisconsin as tilt Democrat on our map, indicating a close race that slightly favors Harris. Michigan. Michigan, another key state in the Rust Belt, shows similar trends. Early voting data reveals a 10-point lead for Democrats, with 47% of ballots cast by registered Democrats versus 37% by Republicans. This margin mirrors the early vote lead Democrats held in 2020 when Biden won the state by 2.8%. Polling in Michigan has consistently shown Harris with a small but stable lead over Trump, averaging around 1.5% in recent weeks. With this early voting advantage and favorable polling, Michigan will be classified as lean Democrat on our map, suggesting that Harris is likely to win by a margin of 2 to 6 points. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, often considered the ultimate swing state, is shaping up to be one of the most hotly contested states in 2024. Early voting returns indicate a strong Democratic advantage, with 49% of ballots cast by registered Democrats compared to 38% by Republicans. This 11-point lead is slightly larger than the 9-point advantage Democrats held at this point in 2020. However, Trump has been polling well in Pennsylvania, with some recent polls showing him leading Harris by a small margin. Despite the strong Democratic early vote, the state's large rural Republican base typically turns out in high numbers on Election Day, which could close the gap. For now, I'll categorize Pennsylvania as tilt Democrat, indicating a narrow advantage for Harris, but acknowledging that this state is very much in play. Ohio. Ohio, once a key battleground, has trended more Republican in recent cycles. Trump won Ohio by 8 points in both 2016 and 2020, and early voting data suggests a similar trend this year. So far, 43% of early ballots have been cast by Republicans compared to 35% by Democrats, giving Republicans an 8-point edge. This early voting margin closely mirrors the 2020 numbers, where Republicans led early voting by 7 points. Given Ohio's increasingly red tilt and Trump's consistent polling lead in the state, I'll categorize Ohio as likely Republican on our map. Iowa. Iowa, like Ohio, has also shifted to the right in recent years. Trump won the state by 8.2 points in 2020, and early voting returns suggest a similar result in 2024. Republicans currently hold a 9-point lead in early voting, with 43% of ballots cast by Republicans compared to 34% by Democrats. This early vote margin is slightly larger than the 7-point lead Republicans held in 2020. Given Iowa's trend toward the GOP and Trump's polling lead in the state, Iowa will be placed in the likely Republican category. Minnesota. Minnesota has been a Democratic stronghold for decades, and early voting data suggests that it will remain so in 2024. Democrats currently lead Republicans by 16 points in early voting, with 51% of ballots cast by Democrats compared to 35% by Republicans. This margin is nearly identical to the early voting numbers from 2020, when Biden won Minnesota by 7.1%. Polling also shows Harris leading Trump by a comfortable margin in the state. As a result, Minnesota will be categorized as likely Democrat on our map. Florida. Florida, the largest battleground state in the country, is always a focal point in presidential elections. Early voting data shows Republicans with a slight edge, with 41% of ballots cast by Republicans compared to 38% by Democrats. This 3-point Republican lead is narrower than the 5-point margin Republicans held in early voting in 2020, when Trump won the state by 3.3%. Florida's early vote tends to favor Republicans, with Democrats historically relying more on Election Day turnout. Polling in Florida has been close, with Trump holding a small lead over Harris in most surveys. Given Florida's tendency to lean Republican in recent cycles, I'll place it in the lean Republican category, indicating that Trump is favored to win, but by a relatively small margin. Georgia. Georgia was one of the biggest surprises of the 2020 election, flipping blue for the first time since 1992. Early voting data for 2024 shows Democrats with a 3-point lead, with 42% of ballots cast by Democrats compared to 39% by Republicans. This is a positive sign for Harris, as Democrats only had a 1-point early voting lead in 2020. However, polling in Georgia has been tight, with both Trump and Harris running neck and neck. Given the narrow early voting margin and the close polling, I'll categorize Georgia as tilt Republican, acknowledging that the state could go either way, but giving a slight edge to Trump. North Carolina. North Carolina has been a perennial battleground, and 2024 is no different. Early voting data shows Republicans with a 5-point lead, with 42% of ballots cast by Republicans compared to 37% by Democrats. This margin is similar to the 2020 early voting numbers, where Republicans led by 4 points. Trump won North Carolina by 1.3% in 2020, and recent polling shows a similarly close race. Given the Republican early voting lead and Trump's slight edge in the polls, I'll place North Carolina in the lean Republican category. Virginia. Virginia has shifted from a battleground state to a Democratic stronghold in recent cycles, and early voting data suggests that trend will continue in 2024. Democrats currently lead Republicans by 17 points in early voting, with 52% of ballots cast by Democrats compared to 35% by Republicans. This margin is even larger than the 14-point lead Democrats held in early voting in 2020, when Biden won the state by 10.1%. Polling shows Harris with a comfortable lead in Virginia, and I'll categorize the state as likely Democrat on our map. New Hampshire is another small but important battleground state. Early voting data is limited, but polling shows Harris with a small lead over Trump. Biden won New Hampshire by 7.4% in 2020, and recent polls suggest a similar result in 2024. I'll place New Hampshire in the lean Democrat category. Maine. Maine, like Nebraska, splits its electoral votes by congressional district. Early voting data shows Democrats with a strong lead in the statewide race, with 53% of ballots cast by Democrats compared to 35% by Republicans. This is consistent with Maine's leftward tilt in recent elections, and I'll categorize the statewide race as likely Democrat. However, the 2nd congressional district, which Trump won by 7.4% in 2020, remains competitive. Early voting data from the district is limited, but polling suggests another close race. I'll categorize the 2nd district as tilt Republican. Conclusion. With our electoral map nearly complete, let's tally up the results. Kamala Harris currently has 231 electoral votes in her column, while Donald Trump has 228. This leaves us with several toss-up states that will ultimately decide the election: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. These states are all categorized as tilt or lean, meaning they could realistically go either way. As we move closer to Election Day, the race remains incredibly tight, and the final outcome will likely come down to a few thousand votes in key battlegrounds. Early voting data provides valuable insights, but there is still a long way to go, and much could change in the coming weeks. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to Poll Watchers for continued updates on the 2024 election. We'll be keeping a close eye on the numbers and providing you with the most accurate analysis as we approach Election Day. Until next time.